George W. Bush served as the 43rd President of the United States from 2001 to 2009. He came to the White House hoping to implement a broad domestic agenda, but the events of September 11, 2001 would define his presidency. In April, the George W. Bush Presidential Library and Museum opened in Dallas, Texas. He says it is a place for historians and visitors to study the decisions he made and what it was like to make them. I visited George W. Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush in Dallas last week, and here is our conversation.
Mr. President, thank you very much for allowing us to come here to see this new building that is the Bush Library.
Yes, sir.
Let me start with Boston, because everybody's talking about Boston. Yeah. You take great pride in the fact that you made the country safe after 9/11. But does Boston say you can never be safe from terrorism?
I used to say that we had to be 100% right in order to protect the homeland, and the enemy only had to be right once. And it's very difficult to stop a terrorist attack. The good news is the country is more aware of the threat, and local communities are more aware of threats, and but it's awfully hard to protect the country.
And the response has been exemplary.
I think so. I really do. I've been very impressed by the response at all levels of government.
It's different now because it's beyond Al-Qaeda. It's coming from Chechnya, it's coming from Yemen, it's coming from a whole range of places. I mean, do we need a different kind of strategy?
Well, that's going to be up to the president and the people that have the intelligence. I don't have the latest intelligence, so it's hard for me to give you an opinion. I do believe, however, that the condition overseas matters to our security, and therefore when you find people who are frustrated as a result of bad governance or frustrated as a result of nobody seeming to care about their health or education, there's a hopelessness that sets in, and that the extremists can exploit that hopelessness. And so here at the Bush Center, one thing we're doing is spreading freedom, or helping to spread freedom as a way to marginalize the radicals.
Freedom is the sort of key word here at this center.
Yes, it is. Freedom of markets, freedom from ignorance, freedom from disease, and freedom from tyranny. And we've got programs specifically designed to promote freedom.
The dedication is on Thursday.
Yes, sir.
All the ex-presidents are coming.
I'm very excited, and the current president.
And the current president, and the First Lady.
Absolutely, and we're very grateful for that.
Yeah. President Bush, 41.
Yes, sir.
How's his health?
Well, he's coming, and people will be, those who talk to him, have a chance to speak with him, will be pleased with his spirit. And he's obviously got a strong desire to live. And but he can't walk very well. He's immobile. But he will be smiling.
Define your relationship with him, because your brother Jeb said to me, he's my hero.
Well, he's certainly been a role model for all of us. He is an inspiration for me, Jeb, Neil, Marvin, and Daro, because he, first and foremost, was a great father. In spite of his busyness, he took time to let us know how much he loved us. And so my relationship with my dad is one based upon love and admiration.
Unconditional love.
Unconditional love. I tell people that his unconditional love made it easier to take risk in life. I mean, you could run for president and lose, and they say, what a pathetic candidate. Or you could run and win, they say, what a pathetic president. But either way, it doesn't matter if you have the unconditional love of somebody you admire. I really admire Dad.
But your unconditional love for him, you were devastated by the results in '92.
I really was. It was a miserable year. And I learned how hard it is to be a loved one of a president, which caused me to hesitate when I was thinking about running for president, because I knew my girls would go through the same agony that I went through for my dad. What was interesting during the presidency is that my dad and my roles got reversed. In '92, I was miserable on his behalf, and for 8 years, he was miserable on mine.
But did he give you advice? This has often been discussed, and maybe we'll learn from the library. There are emails now.
Yeah.
In which
none of my emails.
To him.
or from him to me, because I didn't email, sadly enough, during the presidency. I was fearful of the FOIA requests.
Can you tell us more about what he said to you during the toughest decisions?
You know what he said? Had I said, what do I do? He'd have said, send your briefers down. I mean, he understood presidential decision making, and he knows that each presidential decision requires advice from people who have studied an issue. And so I can't remember an incident when he gave me advice on a particular issue.
Did you ever ask?
You know, I can't remember whether I did or not, Charlie, but I know this, and I remember clearly that when it came time to make tough decisions like on the removal of Saddam Hussein, his words were very comforting. He said, son, I know how hard a decision it is for you. I've made the similar type decision, and God be with you. In other words, the relationship was not one of advisor to advisee. The relationship was one of loving dad to a son who was giving it his all.
Yeah, but he also was a man who had been there before.
That's right.
And he was a man who had been at war with Saddam Hussein before.
That's right, yeah. No, but I can't remember a specific incident where I called up and said, what do I do? I mean, I had plenty of good advisors around me, people whose judgment I trusted, and people who had studied the issues.
When you look back at the 8 years you were president and the 4 years that President Obama, some say he has endorsed some of your principal achievements. Anti-terrorism, using of drones now, I think that started, middle class tax cuts. Do you have a sense that, as your brother said, you deserve a tip of the hat from the president?
Not really. I'm confident that you know, historians will eventually sort out the good and the bad of each presidential administration. And this center not only will welcome visitors and help them understand what it's like to make presidential decisions, but it houses 25,000 boxes of papers and millions of emails, and historians will be here sorting out facts and truth. And so I you know, have got this great faith in history. And I'm just not all that concerned about.
I know, and you've said that often.
do.
You'll let history decide, and you know you're still writing books about George Washington.
Yeah, that's right. It's very, very true, though. It's not just a throwaway line. It happens to be the truth.
And it has the additional benefit of being true. And history changed. Harry Truman when he left office.
Exactly.
But there's also this: your family and your friends want you to speak out more and defend yourself when either the president lays a problem at your feet or someone else.
Yeah. Tell them thus far not to hold their breath.
You have no incentive to say, let me tell you what.
No, I have no desire to spend my post-presidency trying to enhance my standing.
But, I mean, you don't seem like the kind of guy that wants to turn the other cheek.
Well, I turned it. It's I want to be productive. I want to make a difference in the world, and I want to do so without undermining our current president and/or engaging in political debate. Because if I were out trying to defend myself, I'd be right back in the swamp, and I don't want to be in the swamp.
Yeah, but you have an institute here.
True.
The Bush Institute.
Yes.
And you want to look at problems, and you want to understand problems.
So that's a very interesting point you make. The Bush Institute's role is not to defend me. The Bush Institute's role is to defend principle and develop programs based upon that principle. Yeah. For example, one is the universality of freedom. In other words, people want to live in free societies.
Right.
And to this end, we're helping Egyptian women. We're helping Egyptian women build a women's network so that as democracy evolves, and I believe it will, that women will find their rightful place as leaders in the community and as people capable of building a civil society necessary for the democracy to take root.
And by the way, your wife has been in the forefront of rights for Afghan women.
Laura's full of common sense. She has got perspective. When times were turbulent during my presidency, she projected calm. She is you know, I tell people the White House is like living in a museum, which is interesting. But museums are cold places, and she brought a lot of warmth.
Right.
She is a fabulous mother. And which is very important to me to know that my girls would be nurtured during the presidency. I did my best, but But Laura was a constant companion of
She
this.
said the White House brought you closer together.
Absolutely. I mean, you're in the midst of a firestorm, and it either divides you or unites you, and it united us.
But your 8 years, the second term, two things. There seemed to be more Condi, less Dick Cheney. Is that a fair appraisal?
This is, again, this is the perfect example of allowing time to pass so that historians can adjudge the truth.
Right.
And I mean, I know the Washington. This is the kind of stuff I really don't like, which is the
Now,
Washington.
what don't you like?
The Washington gossip. The so-and-so was prevalent, so-and-so wasn't prevalent. It's almost like it's zero sum. And the facts will ultimately speak for themselves.
The vice president told me he had less influence in the second.
Well, I mean, that may be his perception. I don't know. He'd never said that to me. And so I mean, you're much better at getting people to talk than I am, evidently. But it's, I think what's important is for historians to look at each decision I made, first and second term, and they will be able to study the advice I got, and then they will be able to conclude, you know, why I did what I did.
On the decision to go to war with Iraq, if the intelligence failure had not been there, would you have made the same decision?
That's an impossible question to answer, because as far as we were concerned in my administration, as well as every other intelligence agency, we all thought he had weapons of mass destruction, which was confirmed in a way by the fact that he would not allow weapons inspectors into his country. And so the question we all were saying was, what is he hiding? Perhaps my biggest surprise is he didn't take me seriously. In other words, we were conducting coercive diplomacy. And
coercive diplomacy.
Yes, in other words, either you know, adhere to yet another UN resolution, or in this case, there will be consequences. And I never understood why he didn't believe my words. In other words, let the weapons inspectors in, or you'll face serious consequences like the UN resolution stated.
Some argue that, and I think Karl Rove has said this, if there had been no weapons of mass destruction, probably the decision would not have been made.
It's hard to tell.
But it might not have been.
It's just hard to tell. You know, it certainly would have been a different set of facts, but these hypotheticals are hard for me to answer, because that's not what was entailed in the decision-making process.
Yeah. Today, the President faces decisions on Syria, Iran, North Korea.
Yeah. That's what happens when you're president. When you're the president of the United States and these problems arise around the world, a lot of people look to the United States for guidance and/or for support. And the nature of the presidency is such that you can't isolate yourself.
But freedom is at stake.
No question. And I do believe that the Arab Spring is positive in the long run. In other words, I believe the Arab Spring is an expression of people's desire to live in free societies. We had a very interesting moment. We had some of the younger Egyptians who were in Tahrir Square here in Dallas.
Right.
But I was struck by the fact that they weren't sure what to do next. In other words, it's a sign that these democracies are going to need U.S. involvement for a long period of time to help those who want a more secular and more open society to prevail.
How do we help?
Well, you can have mentorships, we can push democracy programs, we can encourage better health and education programs, we can push for free markets so that the entrepreneurial spirit is elevated in these countries. You
were very, very passionate about immigration reform.
Yes,
and Social Security reform.
And also not very successful.
Not very. Do you believe now immigration reform will happen because Republicans looked at election results and other things and said,
well, I hope that's not why it happens. I hope it happens because it's the right thing to do. The problem with an issue like immigration is that there are a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
And a single moving part can end up disturbing a lot of people. And sometimes people focus on the moving parts as opposed to the whole. But I hope they get something done, and I'm impressed by the efforts thus far to get something done.
The other big issue of the immigration reform is same-sex marriage. You were in favor of a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, well, I'm not weighing in on these issues, as you know, because I've made the decision to get off the stage, and so I'm off the stage.
And what does painting bring you?
Relaxation and a whole new way of looking at the world.
Tell
For
me
example, well, I'm sitting here analyzing that tie you have and trying to figure out if I can mix paint to be able to.
Are you serious?
Yeah, to figure out what paints to mix. I'm not saying it's an ugly tie, but I am saying.
You're saying what?
Well, just a little permanent rose and maybe a touch of white, and on the other side, maybe a little raw umber to darken it up so I can reflect the light properly. No, I really do look at colors differently, and I paint 2 or 3 hours a day. I've got a disclosure to make, though, and that is that the signature is worth more than the painting.
But are you getting better is the question.
I think so, but you know, it's all in the eyes of the beholder. I mean, I could lay out 20 of the paintings, and you might like one, and somebody else would like another. I take great enjoyment about it. Sadly, my sister's email got hacked, and therefore a lot of the paintings I've done made it into the public arena. Not interested in generating publicity as a result of my paintings. I take great satisfaction, however, in painting. So this afternoon I'll paint.
Every afternoon?
I try to paint for a while every day, and it's a joy. It really is a joy, and it's a good lesson. You know, one I learned from my dad is, you know, my dad never stopped living. He jumped out of airplanes at a ripe old age of 85. You can teach an old dog new tricks, and I'm learning. So I have a wonderful instructor here in Dallas. She comes by once a week, and I'm open to suggestions, and I want to learn, and I want to get better.
A lesson from Winston Churchill?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, he was an inspirational figure. He wrote a wonderful essay, Painting as a Pastime. I read it and was inspired. And I kind of, this, I guess, typical of me. If Winston can do it, so can I.
His bust was in your Oval Office.
It was, yeah. I admire him.
Mr. President, thank you. This is an extraordinary place because it does so many things. It's a center of the foundation, an office for you, the Bush Institute, and you can see history here.
Yes, sir.
And you can look at the Oval Office and you can see part of 9/11 and you can see how you approach decision making. So history teaches us things, and so we look forward to
well,
seeing
I'm honored
the
you're
library.
here. Thank you so much for being here, Charlie. It's great to welcome you.
Thank you.